one and only issue to discuss during our workshop session this evening. So I'm going to be turning it over to our city manager, Terrence Moore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So as the mayor just discussed, we made a commitment for September 8th to discuss the revisions and updates to the College Park Strategic Plan. And much of this is a function and follow-up from the good work that was initiated back in April, May timeframe of this year, as well as a follow-up workshop meeting that took place Wednesday, July 29th, so that we can do as much as we possibly can as an executive team working closely with Mayor and City Council to align strategic goals and objectives with respect to priorities as a focus of the strategic planning process. As most people are aware involved in this process, the strategic planning process was first initiated in 2018 with the initial revision presented for Mayor and City Council consideration for adoption and ultimate approval about a year ago, August 2019. However, as the strategic planning process is a living, breathing exercise, we made additional commitment to keep that effort moving forward. Likewise, earlier this year, the Office of the City Manager commissioned College Park resident and facilitator and organizational development expert, Mr. Adam Saslow, to assist us with this overall process. So he spent time working with department directors, the Office of the City Manager, ultimately Mayor and City Council with respect to other matters at hand. Likewise, July 29th, we were able to initiate an opportunity in which we can begin to discuss updated strategic goals, objectives, and priorities. Likewise, a great deal of additional time was spent with department directors during the month of August to help us ultimately get to that place. One initial contemplation was to create an environment for Mayor and City Council to offer recommendations with respect to goals, objectives, and priorities. However, given the evolution of this process, it is the role and function of staff and administration, notably the Office of the City Manager, department directors working closely with the appointed facilitator, in this case, Mr. Adam Saslow, to offer specific recommendations to get us to where we need to be. So as opposed to the initial thought of Mayor and City Council offering specific directives with respect to priorities and focus, a big role and function of staff and administration, including the Office of the City Manager, is to ultimately make recommendations for Mayor and City Council review and consideration. Of course, Mayor and City Council as a board of directors will have an opportunity to provide leadership and guidance and thoughts, recommendations, and suggestions as part of this overall exercise. But a clear definitive outcome is that we have the opportunity to provide updates, recommendations to get us to a place in which we can go forward, ladies and gentlemen. With that, the series of recommendations this evening includes the following. Number one, several revisions to the strategic plan as having first been presented during July of 2019, August 2019 timeframe. So we've updated that to include graphics, some other information to strategically align to departmental goals, objectives, et cetera, as we go forward in this next exercise. Secondly, we do have recommendations in place to continue good work with the facilitator and organizational development expert, Adam Saslow, of which I will be seeking you all's consensus this evening to get us to a place in which we can achieve in that regard. So again, a summary of recommendations to be presented in that regard as we wrap up this particular presentation. Yet at the same time, this is us, staff, making recommendations to Mayor and City Council respectively. Leadership will have an opportunity to offer their thoughts and considerations as we go forward. Ultimately, we stand behind the work that has been achieved over the last several weeks and beyond, and we are proud to offer the presentation at this time. So Madam Mayor, if I may be permitted, I'd like to give Adam Saslow an opportunity to provide a summary in terms of where we are, specifically the recommendations and or the revisions to the strategic plan, of which I will seek you all's consensus this evening. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, a specific set of tasks and priorities to be executed between September and December of this year. With that, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adam Saslow, if you can please entertain us as directed.
Thank you, Mr.
Can I take over to add one more thing? That one of the things that we are so blessed with here in College Park is a wealth of talent. Adam Saslow lives in College Park. He is not only contributing as a resident, but using his broad base of skills to make sure that we are moving our city forward, and we couldn't be more grateful. Now the floor is yours, Adam.
Here, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Moore, and thank you to the council as well. As noted, I'm a proud resident of College Park, and it really has been an honor to serve council, the city government, and most of all, my community. As Mr. Moore mentioned, when we first forged this relationship, I was asked to facilitate my primary talent or skill, if you will. I was asked to facilitate a retreat between and amongst council and city leadership, and tie it in some way to the strategic plan. COVID-19 came into play just weeks before we were supposed to hold that retreat in March, in trying to make some magic out of a virtual environment. What we decided would be best to do was work with city leadership to develop performance standards. And that is what we did. We formed 4 groups, and collaborated as best we could in a virtual environment on standards that would guide senior staff over the course of this, now the 2021 fiscal year. I presented those standards to council in the spring, and we benefited by council's wisdom and suggestions, and evolved those standards further. Still, I said to you, I've said to many of you individually, and I'll say it now more publicly, it wasn't taking shape as a system. And for that reason, I had some concerns with the final product. It was not a product, candidly, that I was very proud of. The content was there. It just didn't feel like it was going to improve city governance in a way that I was proud to put my name or my firm's name on it. And following our July 29 meeting, when this body focused on the need to break down silos and work together more as teams, following that, I went back to Mr. Moore and said, look, there's a real opportunity here, a real opportunity to increase morale, and to improve how city staff connect with one another. And I asked if I might take a shot at improving the strategic plan, working with the strategic planning committee to do so, and leveraging the tremendous body of work that they did to write the 2019 version. Thankfully, Mr. Moore agreed, and that's really consumed a lot of the last 6 or so weeks for me. I hope you see the benefit of it. I know I've spoken with a couple of you, but I'd like to run through a presentation, if you will, 10 or 15 minutes, if you'll give me the latitude, to show you the strategic plan and to talk about how a performance standards tracking tool that I've developed links to performance standards for each of the 17 executives that I've worked with, and then how it fits into the quantum system. Central to where we are right now is the approval that I hope at the end of this evening you'll give to the strategic plan, whether it's direct or conditional, and the latitude that you give to Mr. Moore and Mr. Cook to implement the system that we're proposing. So keep that in the back of your mind as I run through these documents. Michael, if I can be so bold as to share screen, may I take control?
Adam, yes, you can share screen now. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I will walk you through the strategic plan as it looks. I don't know why it's not working. Give me half a second here.
Chevelle, you have relinquished control, correct?
I got it.
Okay. Yeah, Adam.
You should be seeing the strategic plan right now.
We got it.
Good.
Okay. So you're going to hear the pride in my voice, because I'm really, really proud of having this document in front of you. Much of the content preserved from the last effort, but honestly, something that I hope is on the city website sometime this week, because it's what this city deserves. It shows the city in its glory, and not only in what it is today, but what it can be tomorrow. I talked to one person in the last few days who said, Adam, you really put your heart into it. And I didn't realize it, but it feels like all those cliches that you hear about artists, and there's a little bit of themselves in this. And well, I'll admit there is a little bit of myself in this. I took some editorial liberties, but in addition to it, there's some passion too. And I'd like to think that maybe some of that passion affected your senior staff as well, because at least in their feedback, there's some real enthusiasm. Whereas when I came into this process months ago, there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm. So I'm really excited. You'll hear this in my voice as I go. I'll walk you through it now just so that everybody's on the same page and understands its contents. Well, there is the table of contents, different use of the term. But beyond that, I try to take the reader through a logic flow. Messages from both mayor and council on the first real page of the document, and then from the city manager as well. The history piece that comes next is drawn largely from the prior document, although admittedly, my team worked hard, not only obviously on the graphics, but also on the the editing of the prior document. We had a professional copy editor take pen to paper on this. So I think all the content matches nicely, but there's changes in wording for grammar and all the rest. I did write a piece on my own about the impact of COVID-19. When we were doing the performance standards, you may recall, we had different columns set up in this matrix and tried to assume what life would be like in this city with COVID and also without COVID. And the truth is, COVID-19 is here for the year. I talk to people in public health all the time. In this environment that we're operating right now is not going to change in this fiscal year, not appreciably. And so I wanted to pay homage to that, as this will be a document that's used, long past this fiscal year and hopefully through 2024. I hear in this page talk about the performance management system and really work hard, I think, to define terms that we often use synonymously. People talk about vision and mission, and they don't really understand the difference. And they talk about goals and objectives and strategies, and they use those terms interchangeably. So I wanted to take at least a page and just make sure that we were using the same semantics and syntax. This piece, drawn from the old strategic plan in many ways, this is a good place to note that there will be some editorial changes. My folks have caught some things that we need to change along the way, and some of those who've already read this document have critiqued it and offered, minor things. There's nothing major in the commentary that I've received, but here in this leadership box, in a conversation today, the highlighted area on screen is kind of extraneous. I'm just going to delete that. When we talk about leadership, it's enough to say that our people need to set the standard of excellence and specify and address big goals and boldly innovate so as to better serve our businesses and residents. That's enough. So I'll be making other changes like that. This is not the final document, but I think that most of the changes that lie ahead can be knocked out in the space of 30 or 60 minutes. So I hope that at the end of this conversation, you're impressed enough to be able to say, yes, this is the foot that we want to place forward first, and conditional, of course, on good editing and some minor changes. On the next page, we directly reference vision and mission, largely from the old strategic plan and the work of the Strategic Planning Committee, but in a way that makes it pop. In another round of commentary, someone noted, oh my gosh, we have neglected to put in a picture of Woodward. And so I have to give verbal credit, and we'll give photo credits to an area resident, Noel Maskey, who literally ran out, I think, on Thursday morning on a Chamber of Commerce kind of day, and took this picture as well as one other. This is a team effort, and it's what community is all about. You all helped me, and people like Noel were out there too, just as a way of supporting this process. On this page, we talk about the linkages, I think, more than anything else, between the old plan and the new. Michael Hicks and his group talked about focus areas in the older version of the plan. And I just distilled that and built a bridge into the strategic goals that we've set in this document. They talked about local economy and growth. They talked about quality of life. They talked about governance and customer service. And they talked about, well, it was interesting. They talked about public safety, light, power and fire and police, but it was in the context of telling a better story about College Park. And as I stepped back from that document, I kept thinking that the public safety is about public safety. It's not about the story we tell about public safety. When God forbid, my house is on fire, I don't care what they say in the AJC. I want Chief Elmore on my doorstep immediately. God forbid there's a crime afoot. I want, the police chief and his team there immediately. I don't care what's in the news. So I wanted to tease that apart and did here. And then, of course, I talked about transportation and mobility because, if nothing else, we're a transportation and mobility hub with commercial rail and passenger rail and the airport, of course. And how many interstates do we have and ground transportation? So it deserved its own unique place. Each of these 5 focus areas found themselves into unique goals. And we'll begin with local economy and growth. And there you have it. Goal number 1, standing out in bold at the top, local economy and growth. And our goal in this community is to create and implement a holistic economic development plan that fosters business development throughout 6 West, renews the once thriving economy of Old National, and restores Main Street to its former splendor and untapped potential. Nice words, but how are you going to get that done? Right? And so we came up with 8, and they're enumerated 1 through 8, 1.1 through 1.8 objectives that track to the performance standards. This is where the system comes into play. Similarly, we have a goal for quality of life. Provide opportunities for people to come together, interact with one another, and build relationships through inclusive programs, services, events, and great public gathering places. I couldn't write that any better. I don't know. That was good. I like that. I feel like, oh, never mind. And then we have objectives 2.1 to 2.7. It's similarly, again, transportation and mobility. We've got 4 objectives. Goal 4, public safety and security, all about power, police, and fire. I never mentioned, or I haven't mentioned this yet. In the old strat plan, there were a bunch of projects listed. And I know senior staff worked hard to come up with those things that were going to hit those goals. And so on each page of goals and objectives, I've tried to capture some of the more relevant sample projects. It is not an exhaustive list, but they're kind of the all-star things that folks on your staffs are doing. Goal 5 is governance and customer service, kind of a catch-all. And there are 12 objectives there, and they're all enumerated. Remember that it's going to become very important in this system. I then conclude with some remarks about how this is going to be implemented. I do talk a little bit about teams, the need for a performance dashboard, and then how folks in College Park can be involved. Again, a lot of language from the prior plan. Acknowledgements to your strategic planning committee that did all of the hard work that led up to this. And then your College Park government with pictures of yourselves, a few quotations from some people. If you have quotations that you want me to include, I am happy to build that out. And a little bit about our mayor and our city manager. There's an org chart there too. Senior staff have been working hard on this. It's hard to see on this screen, obviously. There are a couple of corrections that were noted, and in the final version of this document, it will more correctly reflect a couple of the boxes that need to be moved around. That's your plan. Okay, so how does this connect to the system that we started at the outset? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and then pull another document into play. Bear with me a quick moment. I should have noted too that I'll take questions on this really soon. There is a commentary portion of this session. It's not about me just prattling on and on and on. All righty. Okay, so what you see on screen now is the working document on department performance standards. This will look familiar. It's not the same as what you saw 3 months ago, but it's similar. I do talk about the pods, and they have remained the same over the last 6 or 8 weeks, but I've reconfigured the matrix itself. This is where it gets super fun. So I'll pull up Gerald's just first. The first pod is basically complete and QA QC'd. This table has evolved such that every performance standard is coded. So for communications, we have C1, C2, C3, C4, and C5 and 6. He has 6 performance objectives. They fit, as noted, within certain goals, and these have been QA QC'd so that regardless of the 17 leaders that we're looking at, the goal column directly reflects the language in the strategic plan. We are connecting their activities, their standards, to a goal. But more than that, we're connecting the standard to an objective within the goal. So this particular standard to convey communications policies to staff, citizens in the business community, it ties directly into language coming out of the strategic plan in 3 places. The 5th objective for Goal 5, the 7th objective for Goal 5, and the 10th objective for Goal 5. And if you have your strategic plan in front of you that you can thumb through, you can check the language under both goal and objective, and you'll find this exact language, whether we're looking at Gerald's performance standards or we're looking at Chevelle's or anybody else's. What is new and written by your senior staff are the performance standard column and the resource needs. That's really important stuff, because what's going to happen here is that this is going to tie into the quantum system, where Mr. Cook will evolve these standards into the appraisal and evaluation process, such that if Gerald comes back and says, well, during evaluation season, Mr. Cook should say, did you convey communications policies to staff, citizens in the business community? Just say what you were going to do. Hopefully Gerald says, yes, I did. Gerald then gets a 5 for that performance standard. Maybe he comes back and says, no, I really didn't. In which case, Mr. Cook's responsibility is to say, well, you get a 1. Sorry. But then Gerald stands up and says, well, wait a second. I told you I needed an administrator. I needed some branding support, and I needed an ambassador in addition to my current staff. You didn't give it to me, so you can't hold me accountable. Well, then at the end of the day, Mr. Cook and Mr. Walker come back and say, well, did this deserve a 3 or a 4 or a 2? If you didn't do it, you don't get the full credit for the 5, but you don't get a 1 either. They're extenuating circumstances. That's the system. And every one of your senior staff has gone through this process of developing a performance standard and their resource needs and tying it back to a goal and an objective. From the perspective of Mr. Moore, He's the one charged with managing this. He's the city manager. It's not council's responsibility to make sure that Mr. Walker does what he's supposed to, and it's really not Mr. Cook's responsibility either. It is Mr. Moore's. And for every goal and every objective, he's got to know if he's going to succeed in delivering this strategic plan, he's got to know that somebody's on the job to deliver the objectives and ultimately the goal. And that's where you turn to the performance tracking tool. I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to share something else. I hope. Okay. So what you're looking at now is just a simple Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure somebody on staff can evolve this further. But across the horizontal axis, you have your 5 goals: economy and growth, quality of life, transportation and mobility, public safety and security, and last but not least, governance and customer service. Within each color, I've color coded it, you have every single objective in the strategic plan in narrative form on line 3 and in numerical form in line 1. Again, I'm going to kind of pick on Shavela just because this table will be built out. We haven't gotten there yet. We haven't done the QA, QC on it. It's probably 24, 48 hours away. But for Shavela, one of her top performance standards, in fact, the second, CC2, City Clerk 2, was to decrease the average period of time required for planning and inspection decisions by automating filing procedures and streamlining the decision-making process. She has a performance standard that speaks to that objective. So she's listed it, and we know, Terrence knows, that she's responsible in part for the success, the implementation of Goal 1, Objective 5. But she's come back and said she needs help. She needs help in order to do that. She needs help from planning. She needs help from inspections. She needs help from communications and from information technology. So all of these people are noted as supporting this goal, economy and growth, and this objective. So at any point in time, Terrence can check in and say, who's responsible for these things? I'm going to shrink this down. I know that's too tiny to read, but when this is all done, every single column will have somebody's performance standard in it. So that if you, City Council, said, hey, what about Goal 3, Objective 4? Who's on that? In a New York minute, Terrence can say, this person's on it. And if there is some column that doesn't have somebody on it, then he's got to fix that, because otherwise it's not getting done. I hope all that makes sense. It is a system, and it ties into the 4th piece, which is quantum, so that every person on staff goes through their evaluation. And in addition to saying, oh yeah, I was really good on a team, or I was really good at managing stress, there are these performance standards. Every senior staffer has at least 3, I think, and at most 6. And so their feet are held to the fire as well. I say that in a negative way. Their feet are held to the fire. On the other side, they know what their role is in city government, what they're there to achieve. And if somebody says, hey, can you do this thing over there? It's not helping to implement the strategic plan. Do we need to adapt the strategic plan, or do we need to adapt the individual or staff differently? But as a system, you're able to determine your needs. Let me stop for a few minutes here. That's a lot to digest. If you have all taken a look at this beforehand, it's probably a little less drinking from a fire hose. But if this is your first view, a pause here might be helpful. I'd actually, in the pause, like to turn to anybody who is involved in this process with me to highlight anything that I missed along the way. Did I hit it, or did I miss?
Adam, I'd like to make a couple of comments. First of all, you should be proud of what you've done. Excellent work, very commendable.
Thank you.
this is really exciting. I mean, for a few reasons. One, it's going to help us work closer together. We have defined goals. We know a direction now. And we're focused. We know where our focus points are. So I want to throw it out because you've done an excellent job of having this process flow very smoothly and make sense.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the compliment.
And Adam, if I may.
Sure.
So as we worked pretty vigorously up until the latter part of last week while we were finalizing the agenda. And of course, this is a working draft. I'd like to point that out for everybody's benefit. I think you touched upon that in your comments. I don't believe I was clear to that effect in my introductory remarks on the subject, but it is. And people like Councilman Clay, Councilman Allen, others had an opportunity to visit with us over the weekend to offer their updates and feedback. And I just wish to offer my public appreciation to that effect for you all as well. So thank you.
Thank you. To the issue of it being a draft, I'd like to call this a draft final. I'm hoping, and I didn't mention this yet, that for anybody out there, senior staff, council, mayor, town manager, or city manager, if you have comments back, editorial, more substantive, if you could get them back to me by Thursday night, I can have my people take one more look at it, make all the corrections, and hopefully by Friday close the business. You have something that A, is final and you can put it on the website. B, is in a file format such that either Michael or Gerald can make later changes down the road. There has to be a passing of the torch, I think, on the strategic plan. That I'd like to do this week. So if folks could get back to me within 48 hours with comments at any level, I'd be really grateful. Other thoughts from senior staff first, and then we'll turn to council. I'm really curious about where council is on this.
Well, Adam, this is Mike Hicks, the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. I would like to hear from our senior staff on what they think about the document. I mean, I've read it several times and I'm on board 110%. But I want everybody to understand there's actually three parts of it. There's the strategic planning portion, there's the performance management portion, then there's also next steps. So once we really get this thing moving, we've got to have a facilitator to make sure that we stay on track with all of these goals that will keep us from going back into our silos. So I'd like to hear from some of our department heads on what they think about the document.
Hey, Adam, it's Michelle Johnson. I know when we first started this, it was working on our individual goals. And I think I texted you in the middle of an executive meeting about silos at one point in time. And the documents, I think, bring everybody in together as a team and seeing how we're working instead of just because specific goal oriented. Now we've got a complete department head goal working together and how we work together. I know that was something that me new in this position. Who do I work with to get what down? And that helped me, especially visually on the document.
Cool.
Someone else from the Strategic Planning Committee.
This is Mercedes. I think this is a great tool for onboarding because when we onboard people now, they really don't know which direction to do, and they have to fumble their way until they find their way. And I think this is a great tool when you are onboarding department heads, and even for the staff to know who's who, who's where, and how do they get resources to get things done. So I'm excited about it.
What about Michelle Alexander?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, this is really exciting to see it come together like this and the cross-department, identifying a cross-department shared work towards common goals. It's a great, it's going to really move us forward. My only comment is it's kind of small. It's really in the next steps of one, this all needs a time frame. So holding a department head well, actually this is for each department. The department head leads these, but the departments are executing these tasks that you see. So we have to keep in mind the time frame, that it's not going to happen necessarily this year or the next year. And it also, some of these are dependent on budget resources. And the other is when I've worked in groups, I always remind people that people support a world that they help create. So thinking creatively how we take this as leaders with our staffs, and so that they all know that they're part of a team and we share with them the goals, and then soliciting input. How would they like to see these things get achieved? Have them actively part of the work program and executing all of these.
Okay. I mean, Mike Mason, Elmore, Hugh Richardson, Shavela. Anybody else?
And you can say you hate it too.
That's how you feel.
So if I may, ladies and gentlemen, so a substantive part of the upcoming executive team meeting this coming Thursday are, of course, next steps based on the outcome of consensus offered by Mayor and City Council, working closely with Adam over the next few days to finalize the document with the proviso that consensus is offered. And so, Michael, I think we'll have a more intimate discussion about any specifics and observations over the next day or 2 days. So let's give everybody an opportunity to be comfortable in that regard. But quite frankly, for the department directors, at the behest of the office of the city manager and the process of getting to this place, Michael Hicks, we gave everybody the opportunity to offer their feedback, their updates and that. And all indications that I've received from the executive team, it was that they were on board, supportive and positive, and looking forward to us proceeding in this direction. There will be a follow-up dialogue to that effect during Thursday morning's executive team meeting, as we'll spend some additional time in that regard. However, Adam, as part of this discussion, and as I've mentioned during the introductory comments, we will offer some specific recommendations to continue to work with you between now and the end of the calendar year as well. So that's part of the recommendation package as we get to that place.
Absolutely. Before we move too quickly into that realm, if there's no other comments or thoughts or suggestions on the part of senior staff, I'm kind of looking at the council now, and Derek and Ken and
I'll jump in there.
Okay.
First of all, I want to thank you, Adam, for the work and the time and everything else you put into it. And I think you can see your love for the neighborhood and the area and College Park in the way you handle this, and you can tell it in your voice. But I think everybody's, what I see, and the parts that I've been involved with other companies, when you have a direction and you have a sense of belonging, you get a buy-in from the people, and the people will work together. And I think that's what we want to, and I think that's what you'll see, a lot of people working together, crossing departmental lines and enjoying their work and sharing their experiences and helping each other out obtain some of their goals. So I hand it to you, and I think you've done a great job, and thanks to you. And then again, it'll be evolving and it'll be changing. But thank you very much for the work you've done. And thanks for the teams and the department heads, because they're going to have to be working on this and changing and developing it as well. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Other three council members, dying to hear what's going on in your heads.
Well, let me jump in. I've been involved in doing strat plans over the years when I was in industry. I think this is a beautiful document. I choose that word carefully. I particularly like the distinctions that are done between mission and goal and strategy and tactics, which, as you stated earlier in your introduction, frequently get confused. And that's been my experience over the years as well. So that's excellent. It sets the ground rules, the structure. I think you had a big job. I think staff had a great role in putting the content together that was in the original version, the 2019 version, if we want to say. This is the 2020 version. And I think you've done the necessary work and very good work to take that content and restructure it in such a way that it is, you eliminate the underlaps and the overlaps, as I like to say. And it flows nicely now into the performance management and then into the actual performance evaluation that needs to go on so that everybody can get credit for their role that they play in the organization. You need a consistent system like this. So I'm very pleased with it. I gave you my comments. I had some nits here and there and a couple philosophical things that we've discussed. And but on the whole, this is a beautiful document. And I'm certainly proud to have, as part of Mayor and Council, my name associated with it. That's it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the high praise from both of you. Coming from your world of experience and professional history, it is very meaningful. Mr. Gay, you're out there. What you thinking?
Councilman Gay dropped off for a second here. Or he should be back.
No, I see him.
Yeah,
Back.
he should be. He's able to unmute.
I don't think he can hear us.
He should be able to unmute here. I'm sending him messages, so it should be good.
All right, is Mr. Taylor out there too?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, what you thinking?
I think everybody's saying the same thing. It's a good document. You know, everybody worked hard on what they was doing. I just wanted what we need to do to go forward with it. You know, I think it's a long time coming, so to speak. So what would be the next step with us getting it done?
Let's turn to Mr. Gay, and I will answer that question head on in just a couple of minutes. Mr. Gay, you out there? Can you hear us? Somebody ring him on the phone, maybe?
Yeah, Councilman Gay, you're on.
Well, maybe not. So to Councilman Taylor's question, let me go back to being on screen. Let me stop share for a quick second and then share screen.
I don't have any audio.
Councilman Gay. Hello? I'm sorry, folks. Let me mute here and help Councilman Gay real quick.
Okay. Councilman Taylor, so I put together a next step recommendation that now feels like it has a place given the system that's been created. Let me step back for 1 second because I don't think I've done justice to the Strategic Planning Committee. I know there has been high praise offered by council, mayor, and city manager to that group. Just underscoring what has been said, the raw material for this document really did come out of that process, which unfolded long before I got here. I repackaged it. I did add a few things, my pet issues. I certainly put in there, you'll note an objective on litter, for example. But aside from that, it was that group of, I think, 8 people that did the real heavy lifting. And then in the performance standards process, every one of the 17 individuals met with me as part of a group, met with me individually. I know that those hours can truly be considered countless. I lost count, and that's okay. But they have busy lives and busy things that they do for the city's operations, and yet without question, they took time out to visit with me tonight. I have a bit of a more of a spotlight on me, but to Michael Hicks and his group, they do deserve the lion's share of the credit. I just had to get that on the table and a matter of the public record. Councilman Gay, are you back online?
Yes.
Oh, good. We have yet to hear your thoughts on all of this. Please share what's going through your head.
Well, actually, we had a conversation publicly. You mean yet to hear my thoughts
Tonight.
This tonight. Okay. All right. Well, I think like everyone else has said, you've done a great job in the presentation. It's very well written. I'm looking forward to seeing it implemented through years to come. So kudos.
Thank you. For any of the four council members, again, the invitation, the request to please look at all of these documents carefully and share your thoughts. Help me make a good product great. And you all speak from different places and areas of expertise and experience, and see this through a different lens. So make sure that it is representative not only of the city's interest, but the interests of your wards as well. To the how-to and the next steps. Coming out of our July 29 meeting, we talked a lot about teams. Now, the tracking tool, that Excel spreadsheet that is in the midst of QA/QC, will be really important to Mr. Moore and Mr. Cook for obvious reasons. As you look down the columns, you'll see many instances where there are multiple people who are contributing to the achievement and the implementation of that objective. Where that has happened, I'm proposing the formation of a team. And in 6 broad categories, they appear in this document that I sent over to Mr. Moore. I think he shared this with you, but I see the possibilities for, at least at this point, 6 different teams. Now, to council, they may have varying degrees of priority. And certainly there is a resource question, not only the time and energy of staff, but also the cost if you're going to have some independent process guidance, whether that's me or anybody else. I'm going to put Mr. Gay on mute for a second. I'm getting some feedback, I think. No, I can't do that. Michael, if you could. So I've proposed 6 teams here. As essential to sort of next steps. And what I'm proposing in the management of those teams is that if you think it is helpful for the city, I would like to be able to work with the team members to develop a charter for that team, along with a set of milestones and interim objectives that get them on the path to complete implementation. And I say all the time to all the stakeholder groups that I facilitate, my job from day one is to work myself out of a job, to give them the skills and abilities to self-manage their future and their destiny. But you got to start from somewhere more than 5 or 6 or 7 people gathered around a conference table saying, hey, what's going on in your world in information technology? And what barriers you're hitting, which is the tenor and cadence of most municipal meetings. What I'm proposing is that they have a reason for being, a charter, and that they map out their milestones together, and that the meetings themselves are about how far they've come in regard to those milestones. It's an important question for council to deal with, probably without me in the room. This way you can share your candid views without any hesitation. I have some other recommendations in here too that are just as important. The Strategic Planning Committee needs to be more than just an ad hoc body. They need to be sanctioned and chartered, and they need to manage the implementation of the strategic plan with a dashboard, something that is a one-stop shop more than the the tracking tool that Terrence will be using, but something that holistically looks and feels like a Gantt chart with people, making progress and seeing progress, not only within city government, but outside as well. Something that you can put on the website and show area residents and businesses that you're making headway. Second recommendation, and I've said this several times tonight, is that I hope that someone is charged with maintaining the integrity of the performance management system from beginning to end, the strategic plan right through the evaluation process. The interdepartmental teams that I've mentioned, and then my proposal, it was a 3 to 6 month professional services contract for a facilitator to come in and get those groups off and running, pretty much through year end. Anyway, that was the package. Fifth, identify teams and reporting relationships in the organizational chart on the website so that people know in the community who's working to achieve what. Those are the 5 things that I would propose to City Council and Mayor. And you can add the 6th, where I would hope that even as soon as tonight, you can convene a vote, and I'm not familiar with the processes here in the city, where you could conditionally approve of the strategic plan, conditional to making noted changes over the next 48 hours.
Adam, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Can you scroll up just a little bit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Those interdepartmental teams, is that based upon your conversations with the strategic planning committee? Do they feel that these are the appropriate interdepartmental teams to have, or where did those come from?
Super question. So I cannot show you the performance tracking tool with all of the columns filled out. It's not QA/QC, so I didn't even want to plant that seed. But underneath these 6 categories, you see objectives that have the greatest involvement of the greatest number of people in order to achieve them. So there is some analytical framework for this recommendation. To the second part of your question, has the Strategic Planning Committee endorsed these teams? I can say without question, they have not. And that may be a question for teeing up now. We've got time. And I guess I would turn to Mr. Hicks first, but then anybody who else wanted to chime in. I don't know if I got this right. That is something for you to think about. It is just my best wisdom based upon, some analytical framework.
Adam, I have a comment that kind of dovetails in with what the mayor said. The teams that you talk about here that cross-cut, for example, on information technology, they are what in my previous life I would call maybe a discipline team, a technology. In one case, it's IT technology. In another, it might be human resource management technology, et cetera, et cetera. So those are disciplines. In your matrix where you have an objective that needs to be, that someone's responsible for. Let's say Michelle's responsible for something in the recreation department, but she needs help from several people. She needs help from IT. She needs help from public works, et cetera. In my mind, she also is the chairman, the leader of a team, which I would call a project team. It's a mini project. It's just getting this one objective done. And maybe it doesn't meet frequently. Maybe they just call each other. Maybe they just email each other. But you've got sort of a cross-cutting in the matrix that involves both of those. And I just wanted to mention that because the teams that you talked about are not going to solve the project management. They will make sure that everybody who is involved using IT technology will understand the technology, and that Michael Hicks we'll be able to say, okay, now is everybody on board with how we're going to do, I don't know, process management of information flowing across the organization for approvals, for example, goes from one department to the next kind of thing. So we need to recognize that I think that there are going to be mini teams as well on each of these little objectives that are entirely different from the other teams.
Yes, but I totally agree. I would not want to overburden the system with too many teams. And it's not to say that, for example, Michelle Alexander wouldn't need to coordinate with Gerald to talk about how recreational facilities are doing programming in the area. She will. Does it warrant its own formal team? A standing team? Probably not. But yet,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that you need to put it in the matrix and manage it.
Mm-hmm.
What I wanted to drive home was that it is going to be, in addition to the 6 teams or 5 teams that cut across in these different technology areas, everybody has to realize that there are more teams than that. And the coordinator of each team is the person who has prime responsibility on the objective, and that they need to function as a team as well. So we're going to have a lot of team leaders. Some of them may be very small, may meet infrequently, and may be rather ad hoc. But everybody has a leadership responsibility in this endeavor.
I think those teams will just develop and evolve. They will just as necessary. Oh, I forgot I need to do this, and I need to get 2 or 3 people involved. And again, that's your team with the one leader. I think they'll just evolve, and that's the beauty of this, because you'll have, again, cross departments and everybody else working together.
Right. You and I are on the same page, Ken.
So, all right. Are there any other questions? All right, hearing none. Do you want to move this to the regular session for a vote, or do you just want consensus at this point?
I think if we can have
I want to vote. Sorry.
If I may, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to have a hard vote this evening. So I'd like to go ahead and ask that we move this to the regular meeting to include the ancillary recommendations to continue working with Adam Saslow between now and December to adequately get this implemented. So there is a cost consideration of about $12,000, of which we have resources budgeted to that effect. Again, it's a streamlined resource outcome we've made available as part of 2020-2021 fiscal year. So it would be appropriate that we add this to the regular meeting agenda this evening. So Adam Saslow, what we're talking about is a authorization during the regular meeting, which begins at 7:30 to include the respective provisos noted.
That sounds great. I would have hoped that tonight would end with votes on a variety of things. So I'm really glad to hear us moving in that direction. I do want to underscore one element of what Mr. Moore said, which was the dollar figure. Now, there are a couple of variables that go into that if you're looking at me, and I don't want to presume anything because I just don't like to do that. But it is bounded by a couple of variables. One is the number of teams, and looking at what I would hope to do with each team is probably about 6 hours per month, helping them to develop a charter and then facilitating, a meeting or 2 within each month. So the number of teams becomes one of the key variables, and obviously the number of months. And at that figure, I think having looked at where we are really under a microscope over the last 2 or 3 weeks, that figure is probably good for managing 3 teams. I was hoping 4, but that only brings us about 4 or 5 hours per team. And I don't think that's enough to get people on the right footing. in a 3.5 month period. So if you, that number is great with an end point of December 31, and it's great with a scope that includes 3 teams. If this group decides in conversation in the next session that the number of teams need to increase or decrease, then that dollar value changes. And if the number of months increases or decreases, that number changes as well. Just wanted to offer clarity on that.
You know what? I'd rather sort of separate these then, because it seems to me that there probably needs to be a little bit more conversation with the strategic planning committee about whether or not these teams are the right teams and how we move forward on that, and get a little bit more solid on those numbers before we would vote on that. In terms of the strategic plan itself, I think that we should be able to, with the input that everyone is given, be able to make a determination on that this evening.
I have a question for Adam.
Yeah.
For the 12 grand that you want to be paid, will that involve any more input with the elected officials?
I like to think that over the last 6 months,
No, I
there has
understand the process.
Yes.
I mean, going forward.
Absolutely. I will never not pick up the phone and try to build even greater consensus than I would without. So as much time as any council member wants of me, they can have it.
All right. Does that work? That plan going out work for everybody?
Well, Mayor, what I would suggest is then that if we're looking for a vote in the regular meeting, carrying this forward to the regular meeting, it seems like what we're saying is we have consensus on the fact that we've got a usable document almost with the changes that have been submitted. I mean, I'm happy. I've discussed my changes with Adam. I don't know who else has, but I think other people have provided input. And with putting the document's very good. We polish it, putting the last few changes in. What we're approving is publication of it. We're approving that this is ready to go on the website, and it is ready to go as far as driving the next steps, that we have completed this phase of the process. And that's what I'm going to suggest that we approve on the agenda and we take a vote on it.
I'm with you. And we come back on the next steps when we get a little bit more certainty on those.
Right.
All right. I believe that's where we're headed. And I think we have a little bit of time to go back into executive session. We did not complete our conversation there. So it is 7:08 right now. And Adam, we appreciate everything you've done. And certainly appreciate the Strategic Planning Committee for all of their dedication and their hard work and their patience as we move through this process. And we will end the workshop at this point. So, gentlemen, if you will go ahead and go back to the link that I sent you earlier this afternoon, we'll pick up the conversation.
Can I get a motion, please, Mayor?
Thank you very much. That's why you're here, to make sure I don't do things I shouldn't do. Is there a motion?
I move that we go into executive session for real estate, personnel, and litigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Where's Councilman Clay? Has he already gone? He might be gone already. All right. All right. That's 3 in favor. We'll take it and we'll head on over. That motion passes. Thank you.